Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people making a difference in the lives of others all over the planet. The idea is to improve communities locally, globally, and digitally. We're part of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors in over 36,000 clubs. And these are people who get together, maybe share a meal, hang out, listen to people talk about cool things. In our club, an online and asynchronous club, we get together, don't share a meal, we're online, but we get to talk to really interesting and cool people from all over the world. Today, we have got someone local, and I say that as someone living in Silicon Valley in San Jose, and that is Alex Soojung-Kim Pang. And he is going to talk to us about the 4-day work week. This is one of those topics that I think just regularly brings up all kinds of cool conversations with almost anybody I meet. I've been trying to get somebody to talk on this topic forever, and Alex, I am nothing but jazzed that you are with us today. I hand the mic over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone listening in on this. So I hope to make it worth your while. So I am going to go ahead and share screen. I've got a couple of slides that run you through kind of the 4-day week and what it is. And I think, first of all, I should say that I am a director at an organization called 4-Day Week Global, which was founded several years ago to help organizations, be they for-profit companies, startups, nonprofits. Now we're getting into working with governments, find ways to reduce their working hours, usually going to 4-day weeks, but other kinds of shorter work weeks as well, without reducing output or missing project deadlines or alienating clients. And also without reducing salaries. So we're not talking about prorating hours here. We're talking about genuinely reducing work time while keeping pay and output the same. And beyond this, our long-term objective, as we see it, is to help to create 1 million new years of free time. By which we mean, if you think about a 5-day week, generally, you're working about 250 days a year, assuming 2 weeks of vacation and you're not working weekends. So that means, you do a year of 4-day on a 4-day week, and you've already recovered 10 working weeks. And so in 5 years, or maybe a little bit more, depending on how you want to count, that means you've gotten back a year of your life. And I realized a little while ago that doing this at scale for entire companies meant that we were actually creating hundreds of years of free time in organizations every year. So 1 million years sounds like a big goal, and it is, but it also feels like a doable one. Now, one other thing to say is that there are lots of different ways that companies are finding to achieve their 4-day week. There are a couple strategies that or a set of strategies or tools that everyone uses, but it turns out that you can, just as with, water, flour, yeast, and salt, you can create a remarkably wide array of, of things. If you're a baker and you know what you're doing, which I don't, using a few basic tools, you can create lots of different routes to shortening work weeks. So the most popular is everyone taking the same day off, right? Generally Fridays. But other companies, depending upon their needs, client expectations, market, may do a rota system where they stay open, but you have a couple of shifts, or some move to 6-hour days rather than closing one day. And then in more complicated organizations, you get different systems for different departments, right? The sales folks have a different sense of the rhythm of their work than IT or developers. And this is a movement that really started a few years ago, before the pandemic, but has taken off and become a genuinely global phenomenon. Number one, it's not just something you see in Nordic countries or places with great work-life balance already. You also see it in Japan and Korea, 2 countries that have their own words for working yourself to death. It's also something that cuts across a wide variety of industries. So there's a large e-commerce company in Korea called Woowa Brothers that was a pioneer in Korea. There are also, though, manufacturers like craft brewery called Pressure Drop, which is located in Tottenham, England, or even restaurants like Mtucci's, which is a restaurant chain located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Let me say really briefly how companies sort of approach this and what they get out of it. So, first off, studies have found that the average American worker loses something like 2 to 3 hours of productive time every day to overly long meetings, to technology distractions, or to outmoded processes. And so, in a sense, the 4-day week is already here. It's just buried underneath sort of these inefficiencies. And so, if you can eliminate them, you go a long way to making it possible to do in 4 days what it currently takes 5 to do. So, this means making meetings shorter, more pointed, having agendas, basically doing all the things that that we all know can make meetings better, but for whatever reason, we never quite get around to. It means also sort of redesigning the workday, often to give people periods of deep focus time separate from meetings or time with clients or sort of breaks in social time, which you also program in so that the workplace doesn't turn into like a Victorian workhouse. And then finally, there's a lot you can do with with technology to help enable a shorter work week, outsourcing or automating routine tasks, figuring out how increasingly to use AI-based tools to help with some slightly more sophisticated things, rethinking your processes, or as one person put it, just diving into the second level of the menu of the tools you're already using so that you can use them more powerfully. So what sort of effect does this actually have on companies? Our colleagues at Boston College have been doing surveys with employees and companies who've been working with us. And what they have found is that, after 6 months or so, you see measurable, sometimes pretty substantial decreases in stress and burnout, increases in job satisfaction. For workers themselves, they report improved emotional, mental, physical well-being. They even sleep like half an hour more per night on average, which doesn't sound like much on any given night, but over time can actually have a real effect on your long-term health and well-being. And then finally, also improved work-family life balance. So people are better able to deal with the complexities of being both parents, having demanding careers. You also see benefits and for organizations in terms of improved financial health or organizational resilience. So this is Wuwa Brothers, that e-commerce company, and this is these are their annual revenues as they began reducing their working hours, first to 37 and a half hours and 35. After the end of this chart, they finally make it down to 32. But you can see that even as they are reducing working hours in a very competitive industry, their revenues go up tenfold. So it turns out that a shorter work week is not incompatible with ambitious growth goals or revenue targets. It's also something that, over time proves to have positive benefits for company culture. So this is a graph from IIH Nordic, which is a web design firm in Denmark. And you can see they did weekly office vibe surveys during their trial and beyond. And what they found was when they first started in 2015, there's a bunch of up and down as they're figuring out how to make this work. And then eventually things even out. And now their scores on things like relationships with peers, around trust, levels of collaboration, levels of communication are consistently among the highest that Office Vibe records. And then finally, you see substantial benefits in things like recruitment and turnover. So, this actually is one of the big reasons that companies or company founders are interested in doing a 4-day week. Very often they're driven to it by losing half of their development team or seeing huge turnover in a year and realizing that they need to make some changes. And so what you see is, for example, in a nursing home in Virginia called the Glebe, when they introduced this for their certified nurses assistants, kind of frontline workers who spend a lot of time with sort of residents, their turnover dropped from 140% the previous year down to about 20%. In fact, the program paid for itself because they saved so much money in temp agency workers who they no longer had to sort of bring in at the last minute and pay 5 times sort of normal salary. Likewise, people talk about the 4-day week as being something that makes it possible for them to imagine working in a job that they really love and they've trained hard for, sort of for decades, rather than of burning out. A call center in Oregon, attached to the Oregon Community Credit Union, had 80% turnover the year before they introduced a 4-day week. This year, it's been 0. And then finally, it also attracts, especially in smaller companies, can be a great way to attract more experienced people and to keep working moms in sort of career tracks that recognize their sort of capacity, skills, experience, etc., in ways that very often are challenging in sort of more conventional firms. So that's the state of the movement and sort of where it is and the benefits that we're seeing from it. So with that, I will stop presenting and turn it back to you, Rushton, and sort of take some questions.
Wonderful. All right. So first of all, to all of our viewers, if you want the detailed bio for Alex, feel free on our YouTube page to scroll down to see the comments, or on our SiliconValleyRotary.com page to scroll up, because that was the massive text before we got to the embedded videos. So feel free. Now, joining us, first of all, is in Houston, Rory Olson, part of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. My name is Rushton Hurley. I'm in San Jose. And Alex, where do I start with a number of questions I've got for you? First of all, thinking about the work that you do, right? You captured these things, you brought it into a book called Shorter, and the material you have on your slides points to a lot of research that I think went into that book in the late teens, right? In terms of the last decade. Did I read right that you've got like a new version of this book coming out?
Yes, it's actually right here. So this it was published by my UK publisher. So it is sort of episodically available in the States. So, depending upon, if you can find a bookseller who's bringing stuff in from the UK, but it has a new afterword and a new forward. And so it does bring the story up to date, because a lot has happened with the world of work and with the 4-day week in the wake of COVID and lockdowns and the pandemic. In fact, sort of Shorter came out literally 2 days before stores all closed in March 2020. So it turns out not the best marketing move, but the pandemic, in a way, kind of by shaking loose a lot of our assumptions about how we can work. And I think creating an appetite for finding new ways of working that don't sort of make ever increasing sort of demands of us that assume that overwork is inescapable and inevitable, actually kind of set the table for the growth of the 4-day week that we're seeing today.
All right. Well, I should say that as someone who works with high schoolers, episodic productivity and production, that's something I get. Now you mentioned about how the publisher is in the UK. My guess is, and I feel like from other articles I've read, that there's a lot of work being done in specific countries where there's intense research on this. And I feel like the UK is one of those places. Are there countries where this has been taken to the next level in terms of the discussion socially, or even in terms of the kinds of policies that are in place governmentally?
Yeah, there's that great line by William Gibson that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think the 4-day week is very much like that, in that you see bits of it in, all kinds of countries, but there are a few that definitely are sort of ahead of the curve. So the UK, there's been plenty of interest and controversy actually over sort of whether it's something that sort of governments should think about doing. At the same time, two countries have moved their public sectors to shorter work weeks, Iceland and the United Arab Emirates. And so Iceland people in the public sector work shorter weeks depending upon their union contracts. The UAE, basically everything now closes on Friday, just, in time for Friday prayers, and doesn't open again until Monday. And in fact, one of the states within the UAE, Sharjah, just has now moved to a 4-day week. So you do see, and so they I think are the two places that are farthest ahead in this movement. You would be hard pressed to find two advanced countries that are whose economies and governing styles are more different than Iceland and the UAE. Iceland, the main drivers there were a group of politicians and union people who are all part of the same feminist reading circle in the early 2000s and have been talking about work-life balance and gender issues for a long time. The UAE, made it, I think, a decision fairly quickly among a small circle of strategy people who see this as a way of attracting global talent, of helping the Emirati economy become fit for the 21st century. And so I think that in very different ways, they demonstrate that both the kinds of benefits that a 4-day week offers and the different kind of routes that governments or big institutions can take to getting there.
So I believe you just said the Emirati economy. And when you first said it, I thought you were saying the camaraderie economy, which actually made sense to me.
Right.
But it also brings up a question, which is thinking about the value of switching to a different kind of work week, and especially one that means fewer hours for the people who are part of these teams. To what degree is the novelty of the change part of the value of going to reduced hours? So what in your research suggests that long term the benefits of doing this persist?
Right. So that's a great question, right? Is this basically a sugar high or a Hawthorne effect that, and then you kind of normalize once people become accustomed to it? I think that organizations do a couple things or smart organizations do a couple things to hedge against this. One is that everybody makes the 4-day week contingent upon it continuing to deliver the benefits that they sought at the outset. So, if you begin to see a slip in revenues or of output, then you rethink whether this is something to continue. Another is that people really like having 3-day weekends every week, and will do quite a bit to make sure that this remains viable. And indeed, the fact that one of the things that happens with a 4-day week is that it turns out in a subtle way to be quite empowering of workers, because no CEO knows everybody's job well enough to tell them how to do it 20% more effectively. And so, but a 4-day week is a great incentive for people to figure out what things they can do better, more efficiently, et cetera, both as individuals and as teams. And once you get started looking for that stuff, it kind of turns out to be hard to stop. I was talking recently to a Danish CEO who said and they've been doing this since 2019, and they have to every now and then declare a moratorium on changes in the company. That they just say, he just says, we're working well enough, we're at a good level. Let's not tear down the engine and rebuild it one more time in order to get 5% more efficiency. And it's not because they are yet going for a 3-day week, though that's an open possibility, but rather, people are just accustomed to having the power to redesign their work. And so I think that that turns out to be a great benefit for the 4-day week. And then finally, in terms of camaraderie, I think that there is, if you're smart, you design in order to maintain or improve the social life of the place. So, one thing you see people sort of doing quite often is having lunch together, right? You schedule that into the week so that you don't have that 10 minutes for chit chat during sort of at the beginning of meetings, but that's okay because you know that you're actually going to be able to spend serious social time together later on. And so it means that the quality of your work time goes up, the sort of depth of focus, the efficiency of the time you spend goes up, but you are also spending better quality social time together rather than, sadly eating a sandwich at your desk and, scrolling through or Facebook.
On that front. So not in talking about that, you are speaking to how culture in a work environment is important for making a change of any kind effective and perhaps long lasting. In that you are here in the Bay Area and that there is such an attention to technology companies and how they see the world and to a degree impose it on everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of things in talking with tech companies have proven distinctive in thinking about these possibilities related to shorter work hours? I mean, I'm thinking of these companies where people are sleeping under their desks or whatever, right? I mean, how do you get people kind of in the space of talking about that productively in this environment?
Yeah, the ones who are most open to it are the ones who have the most experience with the conventional ways that the tech industry works. So yeah, these are, it's people who have 10, 15 years sort of experience sort of in the Valley or in the tech industry. Often they're serial entrepreneurs who started at Google or Apple or wherever, and have reached a point in their careers where they're confident about sort of their skills and their experience, but they also now have a list of things that they think are stupid about the way the industry works. And, if they were in charge, would change. And now they are in charge and they have a reason to try and implement these changes, because maybe it's because of challenges that the company has. It often is something quite personal, right? They themselves have had a brush with burnout or some health scare, and they want to find a way of working differently, and doing it for the entire company is a way of holding them accountable and creating a structure that will support that. I do think that you are quite right, though, that the prevailing assumption in especially in the Valley is, more work better. And that, that despite the abundant evidence of companies that put in enormous amounts of time and energy and then, amount to nothing, there is still the belief that, the magic route to a 9-figure exit is motivating people to sleep under their desks and do all those other crazy things. So I think that the good news, though, is that if you want to try this, that you don't have to actually change the culture first and then change the company. That because they are often responding to very kind of everyday practical issues, companies really are trying to figure out first how to, deal with the recruitment issue or the burnout issue. And you do that through a lot of very practical stuff. And then the culture change actually follows from the practice. So that, the fact that the arrow goes that way, I think makes it a little easier for some companies to imagine beginning, and also gives them a clearer set of clear steps and targets, which, if you're a project manager or you're an engineer, is exactly the kind of thing that, you like to see in your work.
I want to flip the question. There is what happens in an anomalous and perhaps caricatured place like Silicon Valley, and then there's what happens in small town rural Arkansas, for example, where I went to high school. When we think about the parts of the country that are more rural and where there is much more of a sense of, this is how our culture is. How does your work, your research, explore the different kinds of conversations that may be required to get people in spaces well away from Silicon Valley to think about the benefits of this approach?
That's a good question. We have had some companies kind of located outside of sort of their industries, national sort of kind of economic centers, right? Hobart, Tasmania, rather than Melbourne or Sydney, or sort of some village in the UK, not London or Manchester. And for them, the 4-day week definitely is an attractor for talent, right? People who would never think of moving, 2 hours outside the city order for a job are suddenly intrigued in a way that they would not be. In the United States, the main actors in rural areas so far actually have been school districts who have adopted 4-day weeks for the same kinds of reasons, interestingly, that the companies have, mainly around recruiting people and retaining talent in a profession and in geographical areas that are hard pressed to keep folks. And I think we also see some local governments exploring it as well. In fact, there's a police force in Colorado that we're working with, though they're just outside Denver. So it's not quite rural, but they still like to think of themselves as very Western. And I think that my hope is that these may lay the foundation for sort of the spread of a 4-day week to other kinds of businesses, right? And that they help establish the idea that the 4-day week is something that, can be good for kids and families. It's something that, can happen without without sacrificing public services, but, can be done to improve the lives and longevity of public sector workers. And so, it could be beneficial to businesses and to an entire town, right? To be, America's first 4-day week town where everybody does a 4-day week. That's the sort of thing that could get you some attention and maybe accelerate some ambitious local politician's career.
Rory, talk to us from Houston.
When I was in college, there were a bunch of us who were ROTC cadets, and we had an agreement with Siemens Radio that we were security guards. We were at an R&D plant, so they needed somebody there, 24/7. So we worked on our schedules, and we figured out it was easier for us, since we weren't going to be career employees, to work 4 days. The company was happy with that. And I remember I made sure that I worked Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Then I had a couple days to study, It worked perfectly. And I noticed a lot of the engineering people at this R&D plant, it was the same thing, because they could start an experiment and they'd have to run a certain machine for X number of hours to record the results. So they were given compensatory time afterwards. And since our initial training was in the industrial plant, which of course was the 40-hour work week, going up there to the R&D plant, people seemed much happier. And this was a long time ago, but I'm sure human nature can change.
I think that even when people have to compress working hours and do 10-hour days, there definitely are folks who appreciate having having a 3-day weekend. I think that the question under those circumstances is, do you like the 3-day weekend more than you dislike the longer work days? And this is also, a challenge in nursing, for example, where 12-hour shifts are not at all uncommon, right? But I think that there are, that the initial, our initial impression of the 4-day week is that, this is like a strange, novel thing. But really, lots of people have been working schedules other than, the conventional 9 to 5, 40-hour week for quite a long time. It's just that we have seen these as either sort of exceptions, right? The ROTC cadets who who aren't going to become full-time employees, or, it's something that you negotiate for yourself rather than, something that's company policy. But I think, if we're able to reach back and recover that secret history of working hours, we realize that the 4-day week in some ways has proved itself to be useful and viable for longer than, than maybe we realize at first. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, we are about at that point where we should wind down the recording. Before I hand it back to you, Alex, for the final word, let me say to everyone who has joined us to watch this, thank you for taking your time to take in the conversations that we get the pleasure of having as a part of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. That focus that we have on making the world a better place is something that just needs to be part of more pieces of the world, in our humble opinion. And without a doubt, Alex, the work that you and 4-day week organization is doing contributes to that. Thank you. As a guest, if you are on our Rotary page, feel free to scroll down and let us know you are here. There is an attendance form. You can put in your email address and get a reply, so that pass that along to your club secretary if you are making up a miss in your own club. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll see the Discuss forum, DISQUS. It's where we share ideas on these programs and the other elements of our meeting that give us the chance in an online and asynchronous club to interact in all sorts of good ways. We hope you'll leave some thoughts there. Alex, we always ask the speaker to give us the final word. So what would you like people to have in mind as they finish this video?
So, I think that what I would leave them with is that, the 4-day week is already here. It's just sort of not, it's just buried underneath sort of old habits, old inefficiencies, and that it is accessible to many more of us in our workplaces than we might realize. And so I would encourage you to be optimistic and sort of to aim high and sort of to explore how you could sort of make it work in your organization.
Excellent. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.